Members, it's time and we have a quorum. Welcome to the meeting of the Public Works Subcommittee. This is the first meeting in the year of the rabbit. I would like to wish you government representatives and colleagues of the Secretariat good health and success in your work. I also wish that our economy will recover. In the 2023 legislative session, as at the last meeting, we approved 2 projects involving $20.8475 billion. There are 2 papers to consider today on the agenda. They both are new funding proposals from the administration involving a total of $20.814 billion. If all the funding proposals are approved, then the 4 projects would have been approved involving $45.9289 billion. If we exclude the land acquisition and computerization project, which cost $11.86 billion, then for works projects, the total funding would be $34.1283 billion. If I may remind members, if there is any direct or indirect pecuniary interest on the items, discussion items today, please, in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, disclose the nature of such interest before you speak. If I may also draw your attention to Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedure on the voting arrangement where there is direct pecuniary interest. Item 1HL, implementation of light public housing, paper number PWC bracket 2022 to 2335. The paper proposes to upgrade part of 1HL to Category A at an estimated cost of $14.9119 billion in money of the day prices. The administration consulted the panel on housing at its meeting on the 5th of December 2022. Members expressed support for the administration to submit this funding proposal to this subcommittee for consideration. The key discussions of the panel have been forwarded to members by email on the 6th of February. Attending the meeting today to answer members' questions, we have Ms. Winnie Ho, Secretary for Housing, Ms. Winnie Wong, Director, Sales of First-Hand Residential Properties Authority of the Housing Bureau, Mr. Cyrus Cheung, Deputy Head Task Force on Transitional Housing of the Housing Bureau, Mr. Lee Kyu Yim, Deputy Director of Architectural Services, Mr. Edward Wong, Project Director of ASD, and Mr. Chow Bing Kei, Assistant Commissioner Urban of the Transport Department. Many members have already pressed the buttons to indicate they wish to speak. But before I invite members to ask the questions, perhaps I will invite the Secretary of Housing to give us a very brief introduction. Now, on the 5th of December, the panel on housing considered this item, and the item is now put before the Public Works Subcommittee. The paper has been adjusted as a result of the meeting on the 5th of December. In response to members' views. For example, members asked about the considerations for the choice of site locations last time, and at the time the administration said it did not have a comprehensive plan yet, but it wanted to ask for one-off allocation for the entire project. But this time round, instead of asking for allocation for the entire project, they are just applying for funding for a few projects at several locations, and also for the funding for advanced preparation or works for the other projects. So perhaps I could ask the Secretary to briefly explain the latest position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, at the start of the year of the rabbit, I wish you great success in your work, and I hope there'll be all will be fine in Hong Kong, both in the political scene and in society. Now, we have, as you mentioned, we submitted the item to the Panel on Housing for discussion, and since then there's also been much debate in the community, and we have heard members' views. For example, we have announced the first batch of projects at different locations in the New Territories and in Tim Mun. Would they be too remote? And secondly, could we compress the cost a bit and make the projects more cost effective? And instead of asking for funding for all 8 projects and all 30,000 units in one go, can we consider putting forward 2 different funding proposals? And also, we've heard member views on the traffic and transport arrangement. Now, we have announced 4 locations at Yau Pok Lo, Lin Tong Bay, and also 2 sites in Tim Mun. Well, some members consider these locations to be too remote, and at the time we were actively considering other locations in Hong Kong and in Kowloon. So that's why now we've made announcements for all 3 sites, one in Chai Wan, one in Kai Tak, and one in Choi Heng. These are all good urban locations. So for urban locations, we will have 15,000 units in total. As for the costs of the units, I'm grateful to the works team. They have been working hard to review all the costs. They are actually considering all information most carefully. They have done some site investigation too. So because of saving costs in piling and so on, they're able to compress the cost of most of these projects. And so that's why compared to the cost we quoted at the Panel on Housing, we're able to reduce the cost by $950 million, close to $1 billion. And also we've also considered whether there is a possibility of reusing the materials under the modular integrated construction method. And so when we remove the light public housing feature, then the materials could be reused. And then also for a few projects about asking for separate funding. Now we have considered all the projects as 4 projects are ready for consideration, so therefore we are asking for funding for the first batch of projects. As mentioned in the paper, there are 4 locations: Yau Pok Road, Tim Mun Area 3A, Choi Heng Road, and Kai Tak. In total, they can provide 17,000 units. And then we're asking for $14.9119 billion in this batch of funding request. We all, as you know, there's a representative from the Transport Department. We're grateful to the Transport Department, having heard the members' views. We've actually been to the site many times together to see how we could enhance transport support services, or how we could perhaps put in place new green minibus routes and so on. I'm also grateful to non-profit making organizations, professional associations, and many others who support these projects. They could appreciate the purpose of this project, that is, we want to help those who are living in poor housing condition. So this is an important social project with immense social value. We are making good use of resources to help the disadvantaged and to narrow the poverty gap in the community. We fully appreciate the greatest concern and the biggest suffering of the community. We want to help these people get out of their plight as soon as possible. So therefore we ask you to support this very important project that has great social significance and value. Thank you. Now, if I may read out the list of members who were asked to speak: Mr. Lee Chung-Kut, Dr. Teck Chi Yun, Dr. Ann Men Yun, Mr. Yang Wing Kit, Mr. Chen Siu He, Mr. Andrew Lam, Mr. Lam Man Kwong, Mr. Tong Lim Lee Jie, Mr. Lam Chun Sing, Mr. Vincent Zhang, Mr. Tan Ka Piu, Ms. Sari Lee, Mr. Duncan Chiu, Mr. Chen Pui Lam, Mr. Benson Locke, Mr. Chen Hock Fong, Mr. Mai Ko Ten, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung, and Mr. Gary Zhang. I'm sure members have many questions on the light housing, public housing projects that will help to address the housing needs of the grassroots sector. So if you wish to speak, if there are other members who wish to speak, please press the button as soon as possible. I will give you 4 minutes each. Please make good use of the 4 minutes. It includes both questions and answers. I'll be rather strict on that. And please do not repeat questions already asked, because I'm sure you can look at the issue from many different angles. Please do not repeat questions, and if there is any repetition, I will remind you, because we want to make good use of the time available. And the 20th member, Mr. Louis Leung, has also pressed the button to speak. So Mr. Lee Chan Kang, 4 minutes, please. Light public housing, by its name, has started debate in the community, and it's caused public concern. As a member of this council, my duty is to consider the cost effectiveness of the projects. And as the Secretary explained just now, members have expressed a concern about the cost of the project. So we want to contribute by giving you advice to see how money could be saved. Now, at the panel meeting, I mentioned the possibility of reusing the materials. I know you are going to use the MIC approach to build these units, and actually definitely the units could be reused elsewhere, say in the Northern Metropolis or Lantau tomorrow. Maybe you're not talking about building new housing units, but perhaps they could be used for providing hostels at construction sites and so on. So how many of the units could be reused, because that will help to save costs further? And could you promote this approach to other contractors? Now, there are 3 cost items involved. First is the cost of building materials. Second, labor cost, and also the profit of the contractors. So would you consider bringing in experienced workers from the mainland for building these MIC units, and then we could speed up the construction and also save cost at the same time? And I understand for the MIC approach, you will accept the units going by Hong Kong standard, but on the mainland they have different MIC approaches, and they actually mass produce these modular units. So can you adopt instead the mainland standards, so there could be mass production of the units, because then we could save costs too with materials and and so on. And so I wonder if you could consider it. Secretary. Yes, we are adopting the MIC approach this time. Is exactly because we want to make use of its unique feature. Now, they are modular units produced at the factory that includes the toilet and everything. And the rooms, partitions are all ready, and so they just need to be transported to the site to be assembled. So we've adopted the same approach for building the isolation facilities and so on at Chokowan, at Penny's Bay and so on. And then and it will state clearly in the contract that in future these modular units ought to be able to be removed or separated for use elsewhere. Now, we've been using MIC for some 7 years now. We could, of course, observe, monitor the development in the community. Perhaps, as Mr. Lee suggested, there will be many construction sites in the Northern Metropolis. Can we use the units again for hostels? Because these units may be suitable for their purpose. There are toilets and kitchens in these units. And so in the 6th or 7th year, we will see what the arrangement could be. For mainland workers, now for MIC, well, that's exactly the advantage with MIC. In the past, when we built the community isolation and quarantine facilities and so on. We had some 7,000 local workers and also 7,000 mainland workers. So instead of having to find 14,000 local workers here, we have 7,000 mainland workers working on the mainland to produce the units and ending up with some better quality units. As for the materials to be used in Hong Kong, they have to comply with the standards from Hong Kong. But then in the course of production, such as the various equipment and so on for building these units, of course, the manufacturer could use the mainland could go by the mainland standard, but the end product must comply with Hong Kong standards. Thank you.
Next, Dr. Teck Chi in 4 minutes. Thank you. I express support for the funding. Light public housing and transitional housing aim at improving the living conditions of the grassroots, thus improving their quality of life. So I support this funding application. But of course, we have to fare well in this regard. So we have held a meeting with the authorities and I raised 3 concerns. First, whether the construction cost will be too high and whether the selection of sites will be too far away and whether there will be any transfer of benefits with the commercial sector. We expressed such concerns and dissatisfaction. And we can see that the Secretary has been working very hard to take forward this project. On the collaboration with the commercial sector and the selection of sites, there are obvious improvements. I appreciate the Secretary for your being very proactive, but I think that you have missed something in between. You probably forgot liaising with the community, the residents. If we had consulted the residents and allayed their concerns, just like your communication with us, I believe that this would have helped the whole project. I have 3 requests, and I hope that the government can make this pledge. LPH and transitional housing will benefit 50,000 residents, and the next goal is to obtain a PRH flat. But then sometimes they have to return to the subdivided units when the deadline is way past. This is not ideal indeed. For support facilities in the community, we do not have enough time for this, but then I hope the authorities will incorporate good support facilities. I hope that there will be education, transport, and recreational facilities. There are quite a number of housing units, and I do not want the residents nearby to be affected. I hope that the authorities will also rationalize the light public housing project and transitional housing. The meaning is actually the same. And I hope that the authorities can rationalize these 2 projects while I support the funding application. I oppose the addition of a directory post, but then we can save it for later discussion. A lot of citizens are actually so concerned about the funding application, and I will request a vote. There are a series of questions. I will try to be succinct. On discussing while consulting the residents, I hope you all will understand that the project has to be taken forward very fast, as we are helping citizens living in inadequate conditions. For the first 5 years, the housing supply is lacking. There is insufficient supply. The land suitable for public residential units is already being taken forward. We can only exploring provisional land, so we have to take forward the project very fast. The ASD did a lot of design, and immediately we take that forward to the electrical to discuss with you, to consult members. So we will continue to consult residents. In the course of implementation, the Undersecretary has already consulted different communities to understand their needs. For example, probably they need some childcare services, education support services, etc. On the supply of PRH, the 10-year supply we actually have sufficient supply for the coming decade. So the citizens will be able to have a PRH unit within this time frame. So the nature is to solve housing problem in a short run. If there is a need to help residents move out, we will help them identify suitable places. I hope that Dr. Tech will support the addition of a directorate post. Ms. Wong next to me, you can see that her title, she is having a lot on her plate. 30,000 units have to be dealt with in the coming 4 to 5 years, and there are a lot of different duties involved, and I hope that you will support the addition of a directorate post. Next, Dr. Anman, you 4 minutes, question and answer. Please make good use of the time. When I went to a subdivided unit to visit a child, we gifted him a folding desk. That is actually the very first desk for the child to, the folding table for him to have a meal and do homework. This is actually a short-term measure for us to solve the problem of appalling living conditions, and I see no reason for not supporting this recommendation. Regarding Choi Heng site in Kowloon Bay, next to this land, there is another transitional housing project. I'd like to know more about these two projects. The community facilities, whether it be supermarket or not restaurant, I'd like to know whether these facilities will be shared or these two projects will be taken forward separately. For transport in Choi Heng, although it is close to a lot of bus stations, in Choi Fook Estate, Choi Tak Shopping Mall, I hope the Secretary can consider adding more minibus services going to Choi Heng light public housing and transitional housing projects. Secretary, please. Thank you, Dr. An, for your support. Choi Heng site and the transitional housing nearby, we will coordinate the community facilities, and we are willing to liaise with the district councillors to know what the residents living there need. Like public housing on the ground floor, there are actually a lot of chances for us to provide facilities which will be open to the residents to use them. Not only for the transitional housing nearby, the whole community can actually benefit from these as well. They can take part in the activities to be held there. So we thank legislators for giving us opinions such as laundry services, shops, childcare services, and we will set this out in the contracts in the future. On transport, in Choi Heng light public housing, we will add one more minibus stop, and this is to strengthen the services. Next one, Mr. Yang Wen-kit. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary Winnie Ho, for meeting with the three district councillors. We fully reflected the demands of the residents to the Secretary. The land will be released for future development. That is the original development. Please, in a moment, tell us how you will be able to achieve 2+5. Kai Tak Station in peak hours only has a ridership of 50%, which is more than enough. Do you know that in Kai Tak there will be 4 more estates to be commissioned, totaling 3,500 units, coupled with the Kai Tak Sport area and the 1,700 LPH units, but the Secretary is just saying the addition of 2 minibus routes. Will the citizens actually pack full in the Kai Tak MTR station? So will you consider monorail transport system in order to solve the problem facing the Kai Tak area. There is a lack of recreational and sport facilities. J3 was supposed to build a library and a swimming pool. Will you consider expediting the development of J3 in order to solve the problem of a lack of recreational and sport facilities? In relation to Kai Tak Underground Street, we will consider implementing these in phases. Secretary, please. Thank you, Chair. I will answer in different parts. First of all, I will answer in relation to the major direction, and then I will invite Transport Department and the other colleague to take them. Please make good use of your time and be succinct. I'd like to let members know that 2 years of construction period and 5 years of use. Afterwards, we will release land for the original long-term development. For example, Kai Tak is a commercial land. The CBD2 in Kai Tak, the purpose is still the same. For transport, I will ask colleague from Transport Department, TD. On transport, to Kai Tak Station, 5 to 7 minutes away, and 6 to 8 minutes away will lead you to Prince Edward Road. There will be different minibus routes going to Hong Kong Island. There will be 2 more minibus routes to be added. One going to Kai Tak public transportation interchange to the cruise terminal through Kowloon. The second will depart from the PTI and then to Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong Pier. We are also considering new bus routes, and we will consult this year. 1 to Kai Tak Cruise Terminal to Tsim Sha Tsui. In West Kowloon, 28 city bus the terminus will be connected to Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. We will monitor the situation. When there is a need to improve, we will work to improve the services. Permanent Secretary, I will try my best to be fast. For 1JS, there is a plan to build a complex including library, stadium, indoor swimming pool, such facilities. I hope that these will be commissioned as soon as possible. The Bureau has agreed to expedite the development in the coming 5 years. We will initiate the technical feasibility study, and we hope that the construction will take place in the second 5 years. The underground shopping street will span Kai Tak and Song Wong Tai MTR station, 1,600 meters in total. We are already starting the construction projects. Some of them are private projects. 70% will be commissioned between 2023 and 2029, while the remaining 30% include the selection of sites of LPH, and they will be developed by developers. Next one, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I support the government to be bold to improve the living conditions of the inadequately housed so their living conditions can be improved honestly. Since policy address last year, the announcement of the LPH project in less than 4 years, the LPH is already being taken forward. The government authorities heeded public views, and I believe that we should recognize their work. They have taken forward the project in such a short span of time, but then they are too eager to improve the living conditions of the citizens, so that they are actually taking forward this too fast, thus causing concerns in the community. I hope that the government can strengthen the process of communication with the community so that the public concerns can be allayed. From the perspective of construction, according to paragraph 13, Yuen Long Yaopok Road and Shangshui Lin Tong Mei, 3-story LPH units will be built, whereas the remaining will be 17 to 19 stories, low-rise compared with high-rise. The low-rise buildings will have more units, so the average cost should be lower. In Annex 6 and other information in the documents show that the construction site, I find that for high-rise building, the cost is actually 10% more expensive because of the environmental factors. Is that because of the high cost in the piling works? To make optimal use of land, should we fortify foundation and make sure we can increase the height of LPH units to provide more units while reducing the construction cost of the LPH while maintaining the safety standard? The site will be returned to the original developers, but then the foundation will actually be wasted. Can you factor in the foundation so that it will suit any further use? A particular set of piles have been considered, and they will be made available and suitable for the use of future. Probably this will be reflected in the price in the sale of land, and this will be reflected in the public expenditure.
主席，多謝議員。其實每
Secretary, please. Thank you. For all these sites, it's not been easy to find these sites. Of course, we want to make full use of the potential of these sites. That means we want to build more units. For the NT area, because of the soil situation, we don't want to spend too much time on reinforcing the ground, and so that's why we go for 3-story LPH. For other sites, we try to build more units as fast as possible, and that will lead to the need for foundation works. I think Mr. Chen's suggestion is brilliant. I hope the works team will consider it. Now, the buildings department has some code of practice, and to say that piles could be reused. So how could we, ensure better reuse of piles and other projects, while the architectural service department is aware of the need, and they will actually look into that. Perhaps the administration could provide more information to see whether they could actually use the caissons, for example. Mr. Andrew Lam, if I may first declare that the organization I'm associated with, SOCO, has all along been in support of light public housing, and they've been involved actually, and I share their position. But as I express support for this project, I also believe there's room for further improvement in terms of cost and so on. I have two specific questions. First one, on the cost of the projects. Building cost is about $8.5 billion. Now, I won't compare it with the conventional public housing, because it's like comparing apples with oranges. So we could compare the cost with that for transitional housing. Now, for small units conversion, the cost is about $200,000 to $300,000. $8.5 billion divided by 200 divided by 70,000 units. So It's about the cost is about 300,000 or 400,000 units, so on, and that's for the production of the modular units. And probably there's also some cost involved in assembling the units. So I hope the Bureau will look into that further. Now in Kai-Tak, we're talking about over 10,000 modular units. So there should be much room for compressing the cost as we're using the same mode for these units. Second cost item, management fees. Now, for transitional housing, the operating organizations will collect the rent to pay for the cost, and for these are light public housing, so that means the housing authority will be charging management fees. Now this is called public housing, but it's actually not actually managed by. It's not to be managed by the housing authority. I looked up a paper of the HA early 2022 for a new public housing estate. It's about $97 per square foot for management costs involving repair, maintenance, and so on. And here it works out to about $13 per square foot. What about the rent collected? Is it to go to the operating party? So because we need to explain where the why there's such a high management cost involved. First, about the management cost, it's not really just about management. It's called operating costs, comprising three major elements. First is support service. There are many community facilities for the LPH project, so we have to arrange the community facilities, and also service involves helping residents move in, with removal and so on. And there's also life planning services as well. So we could help them to develop residents develop over time, and there are also other services that may be required by the residents. And then the other item is cleaning, security service, and so on. And then the third item is repair maintenance. So that means the operating costs cover everything, including repair. Or if after some residents moved out and another residents moved in, there's need to tidy up the unit, and there's a cost involved. But I must stress that this is just an estimate. We're going to invite tenders, so the final price may be different. On construction costs, if I may take this opportunity to say that in paragraph 13 of the paper, paragraph 30 of the paper, you can we've explained that so the cost per square meters is actually lower than that of transitional housing projects, whether they are high rises or small or low rises, because as the member pointed out, Mr. Lam pointed out, Secretary, I don't really want to interrupt, but you have to watch the time. Yes, sure. I have finished my explanation. I just want to point out that for light public housing, the area per unit is larger than that for transitional housing, so the overall cost is actually lower. Mr. Lam and Kong. Now, there's been some discussion in the community about LPH projects. I don't think residents are against these projects, but they care more about the long-term development of Hong Kong. Now, the government has shelved the monorail system, and then they're putting LPH at this location. So that's why residents have losing confidence in Tai-Tak being developed into CBD2. Now, I've been talking to many people. I've been trying to, I see that government is trying to explain things to the residents, and I think that's something you should do more. Now, personally, I support LPH. There's a letter from a resident association LPH definitely better, much better than subdivided units. In the past, government made mistakes with its housing policy, especially with the production of public housing. So the units will only come about in the second 5-year period of the 10-year term. So that's a problem, and so we need to do something. That's why I think I support LPH. Now, the Housing Bureau or the Housing Department, I wonder if you know if applicants have any particular views on LPH. Will there be more families applying for the LPH, or one-person, two-person households applying for LPH? I think that's important information as you plan the construction of LPH. So you need to have certain measures in place so you could keep tab of the views of the residents. Now, we understand that close to 70% of the units will be for one or two person households in the NT. So I don't know how you come up with that figures. Let's say in future there are many families applying for the LPH, more than the last units you could provide. So is there a possibility of converting the 1 to 2 person units into bigger units? Because you are talking about modular units, so is it easy to convert these units? Or do you need to make changes to your overall plan before you could make such conversion? So I want to know what the situation is like. Say in future there are many families applying for LPH. Can you then turn some of the 1 to 2 person units into bigger units for these families? That's really my question. Secretary. Well, we have learned much experience from the transitional housing projects. That is the kind of units people need. So as we take forward the LPH projects, that's why we're providing many more family units in the urban areas. And that's why we're able to lower the average cost per unit. Because we have bigger units. We have units for 3 to 4 persons or even 5 to 6 persons. We believe this mix will meet the needs. As for the NT, we may make some adjustment, and then we'll be providing more 1 to 2 person units, because we're talking about further away locations, and if it's a family of just 1 person or 2 adults in a household, it will be easier for them to arrange their transport. So this is something we'll bear in mind. Thank you. Mr. Tony Chair, Deputy Chairman. Now, as the chairman pointed out at the panel meeting, I expressed strong views about the projects because the administration did not provide detailed information in terms of the cost, the choice of locations and support services and so on. I'm glad to see the government has taken on board our views, is now providing more information. And as the Secretary explained just now, you are only putting forward projects where there is sufficient information, and I think that's good. Now, the cost is on average about 800,000 units, $800,000 per unit, and people question if it's worth it. I think we have to consider the social benefits as we consider this issue. For subdivided units, we learned from the 2021 by census that there are close to 35,000 children living in SDUs. So if you're able to rehouse them even a day earlier, there would be great benefits for their development. And we cannot overlook the contribution these children will make to society in future. We are talking about $6 billion or so. Even if the units are just to be used for 5 years, I still support the government in pressing ahead with the LPH projects, because we want to improve the housing condition for those who are really inadequately housed. For Kai-Tak, at about 7 p.m., the administration gave a reply to Ms. Zarali's questions on the question of mass transport. And there is surplus capacity that is sufficient to meet the needs. So can the administration explain further? Because there will be people moving into Kai Tak, soon, many people moving there to Kai Tak. So, and then you're going to have LPH projects there as well. So can you consider that point? And second point, I all for the idea of not providing air conditioners in these units. When it's a works project, and then the cost of air conditioners will be much lower than that, say for at the retail level. So could you perhaps consider offering to buy air conditioners in bulk for the residents, so that you could lower the cost of the air conditioners? I hope you'll consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson mentioned $800,000 per unit. This is calculated from one figure. But then when the land has a much larger scale than transitional housing, the outdoor space is actually 24 times larger. We will add bus and minibus routes to these plots of land for buses to make turns to park. These are expenditure as well. TD will take questions on ridership. Mr. Chow, please be succinct. Please speak closer to the mic on planning Tuen Ma line. The Kai Tak development and the transport demands in the vicinity have already been factored in. When Kai Tak area is further developed, in Song Wong Toi Station and Kai Tak Station, there is still some room for ridership, and we will monitor the situation. If need be, we will see how we can increase the frequency of trips apart from the MTR. There are other transport facilities to support the area and the development of light public housing. Members mentioned question on transport, which is actually the same as Mr. Yang. Mr. Tomlin's question was not answered well. Can you, after the meeting, supplement information with figures to see whether this is enough or not? Otherwise, it is not easy for you to convince the members. Mr. Lam Chun Seng, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. First, I hope that light public housing can be implemented as soon as possible. Some selection of sites will not be made available until 2027. If we are talking about half a year earlier, for some grassroots family, probably they can save 10,000 to 20,000 per family, and this is not actually a small amount for them. Can we expedite project? For cost effectiveness, can the project operate for over 5 years? I know that you aim at a faster pace, but then you cannot tell me right now what is in the use of the site in the 6th year. And I do not want all sites to finish 5 years later across the board. You are aiming to reduce the waiting time from 6 years to 4.5 years when it comes to PRH, including LPH. When the 30,000 units are all dispensed with, the waiting time will increase from 4.5 years to 5 years and 6 years again. So the result-oriented approach cannot sustain. It is not sustainable. So can they be used for more than 5 years? I hope you can take this into account. Thirdly, on transportation. In the future, the selection of sites will be covered by minibuses and buses. This is your version. do you communicate, well, have you actually communicated with the transport operators to gauge their service direction or level? Or they will not provide services if they cannot make ends meet, if they cannot make profits? Have you obtained any reply from them, and do you have any concrete reply to citizens? I understand that Siu Lam 5,000 to 10,000 odd residents in the second phase. There are quite a lot of housing estates there, and I'd like to know more about the transport support facilities. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lam. We are on the same page. That is whether we can expedite construction. We are aiming at 1 year or so to 2 years. This is actually very fast, including piling works and buildings of 17 to 19 stories. In the tenders, we will add more provisions. Probably those which can complete the project faster will earn the brownie points. We want to strike a balance in this. On cost effectiveness, the modular units have the value of being reused. We will see we are actually aiming to return the modular unit, returning the land 5 years later to the department for future use. But then we have to explore this. On transport facilities, we have noted your concerns, and we will liaise with the TD in the next phase. The TD has actually communicated with the transport operators, and we understand that some routes can be added. Next one, Mr. Vincent Chang, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I support the light public housing project in Shamshepo Yaotimong district. There are quite a lot of subdivided flats in appalling conditions which are not suitable for residents to live there. And the residents in there are hoping to have a PRH unit as soon as possible. We should help the residents, even we can just help them a little bit. We need to help them as far as practicable, especially with the case mentioned by our colleague, the case with the child. This is much more meaningful. I have quite a lot of experience. We can improve the living conditions of the citizens. The Namchang 20, that is a very good experience. The modular units could be reused, and the citizens are housed well. I have several points of concern. With the 20-odd plus 30-odd thousand units, we should have a timetable of bidding farewell to subdivided units, SDU. We hope that we will be able to replace SDUs in appalling conditions. We need to explore how we can define and then replace SDU in appalling conditions. We need to see how the SDU residents, those living there, can apply. Is there less need in the new territories? I have been to quite a lot of projects in there, and they are indeed very good. If we can promote these projects, then we can encourage more people to make applications. We can let them know. For Kai Tak, a lot of people are concerned. I myself am concerned about its development as well. In the future, how the CBD can be better developed. I know that this is close to the heart of a lot of members as well. For Kai Tak Sports, how we can better develop Kai Tak. I hope that the administration will promise that this will be taken forward in the future. Thank you, member. With the introduction of LPH, for those living in appalling conditions, SDU, I believe they will find this a very good deed. If available, they will be able to move out from these SDUs. Rents, etc. will be changed. With long-term PRH being available, a lot of citizens can move in to these units to have their own home. SDUs in appalling conditions, charging a high rent, these are not suitable for people to live in. For the platform, for new territories, transitional housing, we have been to those sites and we like them very much. So there should be a platform for us to disseminate information. We are organizing tours to these flats. We welcome different groups. When they are interested, we can organize tours to these show flats so that they will be able to visit these transitional housing flats. So we will be able to expedite these projects, and citizens can learn more about these projects as soon as possible. We will not stop with the Kaita project. We will continue. We will continue to communicate with the community to heed their views. Next, Mr. Tan Ka-pil. I'm the first in my party to speak in the Public Works Subcommittee. There are three main reasons why I support this funding application adamantly. To optimize the use of land, to provisionally enable those living in appalling conditions a better place to live in. And this is exactly LPH which the government is leading. We think that the community is actually ready to accept this. Second reason, very simple. Residents are in dire straits. A 13-year-old teenager has been living in same bed with parents for a long period of time. A lot of families are in the same situation and we have to help them. We are actually just not helping 30,000 to 50,000 residents. Instead, through such a massive project in such a short time, these rather humane units we will be able to destroy these SDU market, which is inhumane, illegal, and not suitable to live in. And we have to ensure how the 15,000 LPH units have a high occupancy rate, a high uptake. Secretary, does your team have any good idea to ensure a high uptake? Otherwise, when there is just 30 to 40% uptake, the administration and the electorate will also be held accountable. Secretary, how to make sure there is a high uptake? We have visited a lot of SDU residents there. We understand their pressure and they require our prompt assistance as soon as possible to help them out of the situation. The uptake in the new territories has been our concern. So transportation in our funding application has some resources such as bus stops. Siulam, in the next funding application, there is quite a large plot of land for 2 bus stops and new bus routes. The whole community will also benefit. But then we need corresponding cost and resources as well. The ground has to be fortified. It has to be strong enough for the project to be successful. Projects vary from one to another. Some require more family support services, for example, self-study room, childcare services, etc. We will communicate with district councillors, and we have indeed received quite some views from the community. As Mr. Chang said, There should be a platform for us to disseminate information. The Housing Authority has information on applicants on the waiting list, and when there is available information in the future, we will make arrangements as soon as possible to allow the process to be more smooth. Mr. Sari Lee, thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for dealing with my letter. I myself am not a member on this panel, but on the subcommittee. We have been advocating bidding farewell to SDUs. So for the current term's government's efforts to help SDU residents and compress the timeline, we recognize your efforts. LPH is a good deed, but then the selection of sites and the cost attracted concerns. I have received the letter from the administration, and I have forwarded the letter to the residents as well. On the 4th of February, together with Ms. Aoya, we met with residents. On the 5th of February, we received a letter from residents, and I have forwarded as well. On the 6th of February, I contacted Deputy Secretary yourself to relate the aspirations of the citizens. First, probably there is discrepancy in the understanding on the concept of CBD2. Residents think that the Kai Tak as a CBD2, but then the authorities is using East Kowloon instead. In responding to demands in society, LPH can add value to society. But before that happens, residents see promises falling through one after another, including the monorail and different plots of land having their use changed, and there comes LPH right now. As mentioned, transportation. I hope that your reply can be more detailed. And if this is passed, you have to communicate with the community. Secondly, on community support facilities, with 30,000 residents, the facilities right now are actually insufficient. For one J3 site, can it be commissioned at the same time so that value can be added in the short term? For long term, the administration has to press ahead with the development of underground shopping street. And for the study of monorail, you have to press ahead with the study to show the residents that you are actually adding value. Thank you.
Well, there's limited time, so Secretary, perhaps you could just respond to questions that have not been previously asked, or questions already answered. You could please be brief as far as possible. Well, it's about the development of CBD2 as a whole and many other different development projects. So perhaps I could invite Ms. Doris Ho, Permanent Secretary of the Development Bureau, to answer that. Thank you. For CBD2, if I may take this opportunity to make some clarification. As Ms. Sari Lee pointed out, all along, the second Central Business District is about the entire East Kowloon. That means it includes the Kai Tak development area, but it also includes Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong. For Kowloon East, perhaps I could say a bit more on that. We have approved a commercial floor area, building some, and so on. Altogether, it's some 4 million square feet. So that's the size of a CBD. As for Kai Tak development area, there are still 900,000 square feet of a commercial floor area involving 10 sites, and they've not been sold yet. Now, of course, everyone is concerned about the location of the LPH project. We've undertaken that after 2+5, the site will be rendered again for the long-term commercial purposes. So that means you've never changed your plans. To be brief, yes, we've never changed our plans. Okay, that's been made clear. Next, Mr. Duncan Chiu, 4 minutes. On resolving SDUs and improving housing condition, I'm sure many of all of us who've been to SDUs would have no objection to that. I think it's all about whether the government can do a better job in explaining its policy. Sometimes it's about sentiments versus rationality. Now, if you look at the UK, they have city regeneration plans. There is in a new housing project, they would require the inclusion of units for low-income households, and that does not affect property prices. So perhaps, but we don't see such explanation coming from the administration. So maybe they can do better on community facilities and so on. It seems that well, you just say you need to provide it, but can you explain that better? And then it's not mentioned in the paper about demolition of the units afterwards. Now, the secretary said, yes, we can reuse most of the units, but then you need to be able to store them somewhere. And what is the demolition cost? There's also a consideration. Here we're talking about a lifeboat, but we want to know when the lifeboat will be be docked eventually. So you need to tell us about the demolition cost as well. You don't just say, oh, because there are complaints now, so after 2 + 5 we'll demolish the units. But then, will you be able to house the residents after that? You say in 5 years you will have sufficient public housing units to house them, but could it really resolve the matter? So you need to provide sufficient statistics or data for our consideration. Members mentioned, say, the Lamma Island quarry, and then some other members proposed Sharling. And so if you could use MRC to provide units quickly there, would it be even better? First, about the site choices. Now, we want to provide LPH as soon as possible to help the SDU residents living in appalling condition. We need to move quickly because we're talking about, addressing the shortfall in public housing supply in the first 5-year period. And then if we're talking about short term, we have to consider a number of factors. For example, the distribution. We can't have all these sites in the NT or in the urban areas. And then also for the technology to be adopted, we cannot go for complex technology. For example, we should avoid slopes and so on. Or if there are sites without ready infrastructure, they won't be suitable either. So after we take it into account all these factors, we're grateful to the Development Bureau for working closely with us. We work as a team from the very beginning, and so we've come up with these eight sites which we consider to be the most suitable. As for the demolition cost in future, how do we then dismantle the modular units? Well, this is actually a part of the construction contract. It comes as a package, so the demolition is included in the contract. But of course, after 7 years, where will we send these modular units to, and for what purposes? It's hard for us to say 7 years before. As long as we keep the options open, then we will eventually have the answer. As to where we send these modular units, how they're going to be assembled again, and how high will be they stacked, and so on. Well, this will all have to do with the project estimates in future. Just like today, or we no longer need so many isolation of community or quarantine facilities, and there's discussion in the community as to what we can do with those units. We don't want to put them to waste. So after 7 years later, we will certainly have regard to the needs in the community in using these units again. For example, just now some members suggested perhaps we're going to have many building projects in the northern metropolis. Perhaps these units could be used for workers' hostels or for storage and so on at construction sites. So we'll keep an open mind to listen to the views of the public. Thank you. Next, Mr. Tampula. But before Mr. Chen speaks, if I may just remind members, there are 10 members waiting to speak. If we allow 4 minutes each, that will take us to 10:20. So if there are other members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button as soon as possible. And I'll have regard to the number of members remaining who wish to speak, and then I may have to shorten the time allowed. So far, all members who've spoken have expressed support for the project. Of course, they come up with very constructive views. And Dr. Tick mentioned that he will ask for a division. So I need to allow time for voting. That's why I need to be stricter still in conducting this meeting. I'm sure members would want this project to be considered today because there is a tight time frame. If we have to leave it to the next meeting of the PWSC, that means we're delaying things further. And of course, at the end of the meeting, we have to consider whether we would recommend to the Finance Committee to discuss this item again. Next, Mr. Champulang, 4 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the LPH projects. Now, if you visited SDU households, you see how appalling their living condition is. And then if you've also visited the show flats of LPH, you see there's a major improvement in housing condition, and it's an important government policy, so I'm all for it. Now I have a question. LPH, 2 years of construction, 5 years of use, and it does not include advanced preparation works such as design, extra works and so on. So how long would that take? Can you tell us, please? Because it will affect the overall program of the project. Because if the advanced works take a longer time, that means the whole project will take longer to be completed for use. And of course, that will be the greatest concern of SDU residents. And now the construction will take 1 to 2 years depending on the complexity of the works involved. But can you be more certain about the construction period? Can you not allow so much flexibility? Because if construction takes 2.5 years and then you will use it for 5 years, that means the total period is 7.5 years, and some local residents may be concerned about that. So apart from imposing restrictions in the tendering document, would you also include measures that, apart from force majeure, can you make sure that then the projects will be completed in 2 years? Thank you. Secretary. Now, the projects were announced in the policy address in October. Immediately, the team started all the advanced work. We did not waste a day. We have been proceeding steadily and quickly. And so the team is actually working hard every day to prepare the advanced tasks, such as tendering documents and so on. So we want to start as soon as possible because there are so many known factors. For example, even if it's just about laying cables or pipes outside of because they have to go past areas outside the boundaries, so there could be uncertainty. So we want to start works as soon as possible. Now, within 2023 to 24, the team would like to complete all the tender documents, and then we could start the exercise as soon as possible. And the first batch of first LPH project would be the Yao Park Road one, and then for the Two Moon project, and for Kai Tech, the units will be completed in 2 phases. So we will take our work forward step by step. Thank you. Mr. Benson Look, 4 minutes. Thank you. 2 questions, Mr. Chairman. I express support for the LPH policy. This is the first step for us to bid farewell to subdivided units, SDUs. But I've said this to the Secretary. At the initial stage of this policy, there have been some debate in the community. That is, light public housing is not really suitable. But then for light public housing, we're talking about speed, and we want to move fast. Then of course we have to avoid certain issues. Perhaps in future, when the government name projects, you have to pay better attention to that. And of course, in the community, there have been different views expressed, and perhaps you need to do more to explain the projects to local residents in particular. Now, the Development Bureau should be experts in public engagement. For example, so the government should learn from its past experience. Now, these projects are being launched really quickly, and we should endorse that effort. The reason why we have LPH is because for conventional public housing, there's a long lead time. It would take over 10 years to construct these units. There may be many reasons, perhaps because there are many departments and bodies involved, so that's why it takes a long time. So in the long run, would you consider merging the various public housing organizations so that all conventional public housing will become rapid public housing? And then in enclosure 2 to the paper, we see that the height for each floor is 2.9 meters for LPH. If you look at private housing, the ceiling height is just about 2.6 meters. For village houses, it's about 2.7 meters. For LPH, the ceiling height is so tall. Is there a reason? And can you say make the height less so you could therefore save costs?
Thank you, Secretary, please. Thank you, Mr. Look. Mr. Look mentioned PRH. Although not directly related, I will still respond to it. To increase efficiency, quality, we are implementing all these in parallel. We are taking care of PRH as well, including the innovative MIC method. We are taking a multi-pronged approach to expedite the provision of PRH. On the height, the net height in PRH is 2.5 meters, which meets the legal requirements. In the contract of construction, we will set out these provisions clearly. There are structures between floors. Altogether, we estimate 2.9 meters. It is probably possible for us to further compress it, and an appeal to the building teams. If you can save cost, please, when you put in tenders, you can show us better designs. Next, Mr. Chen Hofeng, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I myself express my all-out support. If you have visited those inadequately housed, you will see that LPH allows them to live with dignity. But the government has not done enough on explanation. For example, MIC and then disassemble, you did not clearly explain to the public, but then you factor it in as part of the cost, but then PRH does not include the cost of demolition, and you have to give a clearer account. You have to give more explanations to the public. Otherwise, the cost seems to be very high. So what is the cost of demolition if it is taken out? What is the further reduction in the cost? On construction cost, from the perspective of counting, you have to thin out the cost. Right now it is 2 plus 5. But then, for example, the Northern Metropolis, 5 more years, 10 more years, the cost will be even lower. It will be thin out. The calculation is all too simple on the part of the departments. You didn't show the public clearly enough that this project is not actually that costly. Lastly, more importantly, Secretary, you have to make it clear for those residents who will have moved in the saved rent, what is the cost to society? For example, the saved social cost of 6,000 will probably be spent on children. They have better food, or they have more savings, so that they will have more money in their savings account. You didn't factor all these in, but then you mentioned emotions. No, it does not work that way. So today I want Secretary to respond clearly to questions on costs. Indeed, we do not just rely on emotions. Emotions are an important starting point, and I know that you are very much concerned about SDU. But then there are very clear figures and breakdown of construction costs, etc. The median rent of SDU is $5,000. For LPH, the median rent is $1,500. That means a reduction of 3,500, and in 5 years we are talking about $6.3 billion. And these are resources that can be redeployed. They can use the resources on children, that is, on their education, health, or even their savings. All these can help them better plan their life. On reuse, the ASD has explored this area. Close to 70% was able to be reused. You will understand that there are corridors, pipes, etc. They have to be removed. So in the next project with the possibility of reuse, the cost can actually be lowered, but we have to see how many modular units and the height of different projects. When these projects come to an end, we will start our study as soon as possible. Next, Mr. Michael Tan. Thank you, Chair. Secretary, I hope that the government will understand no one is against helping the grassroots, but when it involves the valuable resources of public expenditure and land, we want this project to go well and be able to help the people in need. Do not think that we are so mean when we have comments on government policies. At the end of the day, we are just worried about the uptake. Irrespective of the cost, however cheap it is, if no one moves in, it is of no use. For the Unity Court, 1,800, that is those having waited for 3 years, 700 over 1,800, that is less than 40%. On foot to West Rail Station, it just takes 10 minutes and you can find whatever you want. For LPH, we need to understand why the transitional housing units in the NT are not very much well received. Many SDU households living in the urban area, they have casual jobs, multiple jobs. First, transportation is convenient. Second, it is easy for them to look for jobs. Third, transportation time is less, not to mention cost. They might not mind the far-flung area because their living habits can be changed and improved at one go. But for those with children, their children might have to change their schools. But even for singletons, there are problems as well. So to build the transitional housing units in the NT, the intake is less than 40%. That is not a very high figure. So right now you are all doing this for no real benefits. Can you consider separating the two figures, 14.9 billion and 11.5 billion? If so, if you can separate them, I will give my full support for Yaopok Road in Yuen Long. 2 Moon 3A, you have to connect that to the rest rail station. I don't know how they can make ends meet. They have to probably land multiple jobs. You came to the Finance Committee for funding for a couple of times for another project, 11.5 billion, and then another project, $180 million. So on that occasion, I supported one, and I was against one. And a response for the transitional housing units in the new territories. Let us put the Unity Court aside. On average, the uptake there is as high as 85%. Recently, there is a decrease because some residents were able to go to a PRH unit. Such being the case, there could be a second round of households moving in. The Unity Court has an intake of 62% right now. There are 200 odd applications being dealt with. We will arrange for more tours, and there will be more pamphlets to introduce or to promote transitional housing. There will be a platform to disseminate information, and we will implement all these in phases. For the new territories and the urban area, the distribution of LPH is actually very ideal, half in the NT and half in the urban area. There are actually benefits for the LPH units in the NT. Quite some PRH units will be located in the north. They will be in the north of the NT, so it is likely that they will move into the north of the NT so they can get accustomed to the environment over there, which will be beneficial to their development in the future. In fact, an individual told me that she did not actually mind the NT at all. In the Unity Court, how many are grade 8 households? That is, those eligible, 700 or so. If so, how will the figure be as high as 85%? For United Court, one more year. Just 10 minutes to go to the rest rail station. I do not agree to this manner of question and answer. Chairpersons of another panels also commented on such question and answer section. I noticed that you have requested to speak for the second round. Tony Chair and Michael Tin will speak for the second round, and I will have to draw a line here. I have asked which member would like to speak, Dr. Chao Man Kong. Later, I might have to compress your time to speak for the second round. Probably you have to be succinct. I have to manage the time. Mr. Kwok Wai-Kwan, 4 minutes. I myself and my party will support this project. Bidding farewell to SDU is a long-term goal, but it cannot be solved just with LPH. As a short to medium-term project, LPH does have its meaning. We have to improve their living conditions as well as helping them to obtain a home, especially for families with children. Quite a lot of scholars have said that in order to make the youth believe that Hong Kong is a community with care and hopes, it all goes down to how we can improve their living conditions. If they spend their childhood of a decade in SDUs, it will be difficult for them to develop a sense of belonging in the community. So for families with children, we need to improve their living conditions as soon as possible. Of course, it will also help to boost the self-image of both adolescents and adults, and this cannot be measured in dollar terms. SDUs are small, but then people still choose SDU. This exactly shows how the importance attached to a flat. For some 100,000 SDUs, 67,000 are in the NT, with the remaining in Kowloon. 50,000 are in the urban area for LPH, and I believe that we should support it. This can address their concerns of employment, and at the same time we can address the problem of housing. For the LPH in Taiwan, why is it left until the end? We are actually very anxious. We hope that it can be implemented as soon as possible. Why should it be left in the second phase? Do you need to plan the provisional car park at the expense of the construction process? I hope the administration will expedite the process. Out of the 30,000 LPH, 20,000 are units for 1 to 2 people. If they have children, these households only have 3 to 4 people. All added together, there are just 67,000 units. That is not enough. If there is a larger demand for units for 3 to 4 people, can we make adjustments in the second phase? Thank you, Mr. Kwok. On the project in Taiwan, thank you, member, for supporting this project. Close to 190 commercial vehicle parking spaces for these vehicles. And we right now cannot investigate on cars. We thank the TD as well as the Development Bureau to provide other provisional lands. There are 3 plots on Hong Kong Island and 2 plots of land in east of Kowloon. We are communicating to sort out the arrangements. We hope that the site will be able to start working as soon as possible as well. Next, Mr. Gary Zhang. Many members mention improving the living conditions of the inadequately housed. The cost of LPH is not low at all. We understand that apart from the construction cost, there is opportunity cost as well. If we can indeed help those living in the SCU, in particular the children, those in need, most members think that it is all worth it. But if we do not help the most needed group in a targeted manner, the use of public expenditure, the public funds, will be problematic. That's why Mr. Tin and a lot of members are concerned about uptake. We have site locations and we have quite detailed information, and we have to take it forward in the next phase. I recommend that the government should start registration as soon as possible. Afterwards, you can decide on number of flats, how they are distributed. Then this is a scientific and responsible approach to build cohesion in society. This is the first point. Second point, I hope that the Secretary can clarify when we work on the LPH, the policy objective is to allow the LPH households to move to PRH instead of moving to here or there. This is the concern of many groups. I hope that the Secretary can make clarifications. The third policy objective is more concrete. Will we take into account those with disabilities so that they can actually live in these environments barrier-free?
意見係
Secretary, thank you for your views, Mr. Chang. Yes, we need to make arrangements as soon as possible for the rental signing of leases and so on. Yes, that's why we want to have the funding approved as soon as possible. Then it could start to work for other on other matters as soon as possible. We welcome your views, on the operation, on the service provision, and so on. On barrier-free access, yes, there will be barrier-free facilities for the large units, say on the ground floor, and for the higher floor units, there will be for high-rise LPH. Of course, there will be escalators. So for the wheelchair-bound or others with the mobility issues, yes, there will be such facilities for them. Thank you. Can you please clarify the objectives of LPH? Yes, perhaps I could give you some figures. The waiting time for public rental housing PRH is now 5.6 years. We are talking about applicants who have been on the waiting list for 3 years or more. That means in about 3 years, people should be allocated PRH units. And I have stressed time and again that in a 10-year period, we will have sufficient supply of PRH, but then we're just talking about the immediate 5 years where there is insufficient supply, and that's why we have to speed up the provision of LPH to address that shortage. So unless residents turn down the offer of PRH, so for those moving into LPH, they should be able to transition to PRH seamlessly, right? Yes, your understanding is correct. Now, for people living in LPH, of course, they will continue to wait for PRH. They will be given free allocations, and if after free allocations they still turn down the offer, that means they have given up on their wait for PRH and they would have to move out of the LPH. Mr. Louis Long, 4 minutes. Chairman, I support the government's LPH policy, because it will bring about improvement to the living condition quickly for those who are inadequately housed. At the panel on housing meeting in December, and that's on the 5th, and members expressed concern. And in response to that, the government has lowered the project estimate by $800 million. I commend the government for its effort there. But I think the government could do a better job in explaining the projects, because recently many residents in Kai Tak have expressed concern about the production of the 17,000 LPH units there. Now, the Secretary explained that they couldn't do local consultation before the announcement of the policy, but you will continue with your effort in consulting the residents. I hope in the process you will try to explain the projects properly and address the concerns of the residents. Now, in paragraph 12 of the paper is mentioned that the LPH projects will not stand in the way of the long-term development objectives of the reference sites, and it won't affect the delay this development schedule of these sites. Now, 10,700 units will be provided at Olympic Avenue, so we're talking about a population of about 30 to 40,000. Now, the LPH population is not in the original plans. So during the 5 years when we have the LPH development there, what facilities are in place, to make sure there will be sufficient schools, markets, sports facilities, healthcare facilities, so on, to cope with the additional population of 30 to 40,000. That's my first question. Secondly, for urban LPH, there are going to be 3 sites: Kai Tak, Altau Kok, and Chai Wan. Altogether, they will provide 14,600 units for a period of 5 years. So if everything goes well, that means in those 5 years, the 14,600 households will be able to move to public rental housing subsequently. Now, are there any measures to help these LPH residents to move out of the urban area is to the more remote NT areas. Thank you. 2 points in response. Firstly, we will continue with our effort to explain the projects to the relevant communities. We've definitely heard your views about removal moving from the urban areas. Well, as I explained, when we consider the operation cost, we also consider the need for social services that is helping residents to move out, or when they sign the lease, they will know exactly how many years the tenancy is, and they know they will have to move out after that. For the CBD2 in Kai Tak, 17,000 units, we're talking about population of about 20,000, so usually is multiplying by 2.5. As for the development of CBD2, Ms. Doris Ho can explain that. Thank you. Yes, Permanent Secretary. About the 25,000 additional population moving to Kai Tak, would there be sufficient community support services? Now, for Kai Tak, it falls into the Kowloon City School Network. For kindergartens, primary schools, and secondary schools in Kowloon City, there is a surplus of places, so they should therefore be able to cope with the additional demands. For markets, there are 2 public housing estates there, and that's some shopping arcade with a wet market. And then at the northern apron of the former airport, we are building public housing units too. In the next 2 to 3 years, these units will be completed, and there will be another wet market there. And then for this LPH location in Kai Tak, one of the merits is that it's close to existing public housing estates such as Choyong Estate and so on. And so there will be support services to serve the residents at the LPH. Now, we have sold some commercial sites some years ago. The developments are near completion, so there will be shopping arcades and other facilities that could serve the LPH residents too. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. 4 minutes. I'm not a member of the subcommittee. I see much controversy with this project, and I see some issues too. That's why I thank you, Chairman, for giving me this opportunity to ask my questions. Now, housing issue has been bothering us for many, many years, and I'm glad to see that this government has finally taken steps to come up with solutions to address SDUs. Now, I very much support the LPH concept. Similar concepts were actually put forward in the past. Now, finally, the government has made the commitment to proceed with that, and I hope there will be results soon. But then I think everything was announced in a haze, and there has not been sufficient consultation. And since you didn't have a chance to do sufficient consultation, should you not have made available all the figures and information, say in the form of an annex? So is it possible that you give the full picture and the full story at the very beginning, instead of waiting for members to ask questions and then you give answers? I don't think that's ideal. Now, the government's come up with this project to deal with the housing issue. I see more to that. It's actually a social project. It's hoped that with these various measures and policies, there will be a new governance culture for the government. I wonder if government officials are aware of that. And then you actually adopting this new culture, because we want to build a caring, harmonious, and mutually understanding society. Now, for people who don't understand your policies, or if there is objection, do you see that as criticism? Well, I think it's only normal that there are people with different views in the community, and we should allow people to give their views. So that's why you need to do more detailed explanation in the process. Now, can you explain the figures better? You mentioned $26 billion, but that cover many items. Today you told us it includes demolition costs, provision of community facilities, and so on. If you had listed that all out at the beginning, it would have been better. And for housing of this type, how long is the period of use? If it's just for 5 or 7 years, there should be much residual value left with these projects. Do we say adopt the concept of depreciation, say after 5 years, what the residual value is? Do we take that into account? And then housing is not just about SDUs or allocation of public rental housing. There are other housing needs as well. Let's say after 5 years there's still much residual value in these LPH units, then can we be bold and start thinking what we can do with these units in 5 years? Can we reprovision these units, but for what purpose? For example, for the elderly, they need care urgently. If we could have, say, large batch of several tens of thousands units for them. So can we start thinking about it? Maybe you could consider, identifying sites for this purpose now. I think you've used up your 4 minutes, Mr. Ma. Perhaps we'll invite the Secretary to give a brief response.
Thank you, Mr. Ma. I hope the project as a whole will also bring the spirit of care, mutual care, to Hong Kong, a city we all love. For reuse, members are very much concerned. After kickstarting this project, we will take it forward and we will see the possibility of reuse some plots of land. We will kickstart it as soon as possible. There are 3 members willing to speak for the first time. And then Mr. Tony Tse and Mr. Michael Tien will speak in the second round. I will then draw a line. At the same time, I will extend the meeting until we finish all the projects. But then we will not go beyond 10:45. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I support the LPH project. Excuse me, Tang Fei. Mr. Tang Fei, I have already drawn the line. Can I start over? Thank you, Chair. First of all, I thank the administration. I support this project. I believe that this is the best given the circumstances. If there is enough land, enough time for us to build PRH, the government would have already done it. So the backloaded timeline can only be solved with this approach. I in fact support the government's efforts, and I can see the new style of governance in the current term government. From the decision to launch LPH, then to the selection of sites, then for the administration to take views on board, the whole process actually went very fast. I hope in the future the government can deal with different matters using the same spirit. So the government should not be held back from any imperfections so that this would allow the government to address the pressing concerns and needs of people. A lot of members asked about the intake rate, especially that in the NT. Examples were cited in relation to transitional housing, especially when NGO has been dealing with transitional housing, when the intake is not satisfactory, then we propose that the government can coordinate it and make improvements. Tours to show flats are proposed, but I do not think that they are very effective. Is it possible for the government to send letters to prospective applicants or tenants of LPH? Can the government experiment? I mean, for the applicants who have waited for 3 years, are they interested in moving to transitional housing? That is in addition to holding tours to show flats. Secretary, thank you. We have adopted multiple approaches. We have tours to show flats. We have a platform to disseminate information. We take the initiative to disseminate information, actually, to people on the waiting list. Starting from February, the first batch of letters would be sent. This is indeed a good deed. The government can advance the practice of the LPH with the transitional housing. Honestly, for the allocation of PRH, if they are given a choice in the NT, they will still face the same question, face the same issue. I thank the administration for delivering the message in February to the people on the waiting list. I hope that the government will draw reference from the experience and will make improvements in further governance. Mr. Chu Kwok in 4 minutes. The objective of developing LPH is to improve the living conditions of the grassroots. I support it. The construction cost is high, but lifespan is low. For the housing project in 1983, there were 22 blocks, which took only 2 years. So why are we actually taking a step back? Is it possible for us to adopt the approach we used in the housing estate that was built in 1983? Instead of wasting years, instead of demolishing the housing, the relevant units several years later, the units are not equipped with parking spaces, but then a lot of grassroots citizens engage in the logistic trade or delivery trade, and in their day-to-day work, they probably have to park their vehicles. If they are not given their personal parking spaces, if they park elsewhere, that would affect other citizens nearby. Thank you. I do not have information on Richland Gardens. From land formation to the piling works, I do not have information with me right now. I cannot compare the information. But with the building approach from land formation, piling works, I think it is indeed a record to finish a building block of 17 to 19 story high with such a short period of time. We are actually laying all the groundworks for the second phase of the 5-year PRH units. We are working at full steam. The Housing Bureau is doing a lot on this front, so we can only work on short-term land. LPH is not equipped with parking spaces. Yes, of course. Well, we do not want to overload the traffic in the vicinity. After comparing these two possibilities, this would lead to a rise in the price of the parking spaces. So we decided we will not give LPH parking spaces. Next, Dr. Chowman Kong, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I myself support the LPH project. It is indeed a very important measure for upward mobility. In the 70s and in the 80s, there were quite a lot of temporary housing. Of course, the hygienic conditions were not as desirable. We need to manage the expectations of different walks of life in the community. I've read some reports. Some officials said that we shouldn't dwell on the cost because this is an important project in society. However, we indeed need to look at the cost. I'm not sure if some officials have been living a very good life. Unlike me, I was once poor as well. For figures on SDU, 30% of the SDU households work in the same area. Their median income is some $14,000. We need to project the demand and then decide on the amount of the flats needed. 1 week, 2 weeks, that wouldn't be a problem. But then transportation costs would be very high for them if they have to do so on a daily basis. For children who need to go to school, if they live in a remote area, then they would not be willing to move in. Then it would be a waste of resources. So you have to project the demand well to see the response of the citizens. If they are willing to move in, can they actually cope with the cost? We also have to prioritize. The urban area should take place before the NT. Otherwise, the people will not be willing to go to those far-flung areas. That would be a waste of resources. Any response from the Secretary? Thank you, Chair. On transportation and employment assistance, change of schools, we will keep them in mind. The Northern Metropolis development is underway. There are a lot of opportunities in that area. Some people might have the stereotype that they have to choose particular areas, but this is not the case. In the future, in different plots of land, we will provide sufficient support facilities. Last year, I finished a report on the Northern Metropolis, and I can supply you with one. In the NT, especially in the north of the NT, the residents in that area only have 20 to 30% of employment. If you are asking them to move, to travel a long way to go to work, my experience tells me that they would not be willing to move in. Then the resources are wasted. The Northern Metropolis will take 2 decades to 3 decades to build. Then you may want to give it a second thought. On the projects of the housing department, there are quite different projects. In Tuen Mun, there are altogether 9,000 flats. A lot of support facilities are required, and that would give rise to a lot of different job opportunities, but then we will keep a close watch on this. Next two members, the second round, Mr. Tung Nita and Mr. Michael Tin. As we have to deal with the vote, I suggest 2 minutes. Mr. Tung Nita, Deputy Chair. Thank you, Chair. I have 3 points for the Secretary. For future tenants, they have to buy electrical appliances. I hope there will be assistance. So, bulk purchases will definitely be cheaper. That would ease the burden on the tenants. Secondly, on design. The quantity is actually very large. So, having regard to the demand, there shouldn't be a large variety. An increase in the amount will drive down the cost. That is what we call economy of scale. The MIC approach which is being promoted, and we support it as well. Hong Kong is lacking in land to store materials or for post-construction procedures. I hope that the administration can expedite this process so that Hong Kong will not solely rely on the mainland on the use of MIC. I hope that the Secretary can consider all these 3 recommendations. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I forgot to get back to you on the electrical appliances, air conditioners, with the organization of the LPH to arrange for bulk purchases. And this is a very good recommendation. We will keep it in mind. On the style, on the different models, they are actually set out in the papers. That not only meets the needs, we can only reduce the number of models to achieve cost effectiveness on MIC land support. Do Mr. Lau, Permanent Secretary, have anything else to add? We have a task force to monitor the supply chain and the ecosystem.
Mr. Michael Tan speaking for the second time. Before you speak, if I could respond to the questions you raised in the first round. That is, can we vote separately? Now, if the government has separated this project clearly in the paper, we've seen that in some school projects, say involving reprovisioning of schools from one district to another. And then for those separate schools, there is a separate item with a separate cost estimate and details. And for each of the school project, and if members asked if we could vote separately on the items, then I will have to consult the government. If they agree, then we will vote separately. If not, we won't. But for light public housing projects here in the paper, we could see that they are considered as a single project. So I won't ask the administration whether they will allow separating each of the LPH sites because that's not how the paper is presented to us. Anyway, you can express support for different details of the paper, and if you have expressed your strong views, that will be recorded in our minutes. So that's my response to Mr. Michael Tan's question when he spoke for the first time. Now, Mr. Michael Tan speaking for the second time, 2 minutes. I have 3 questions, but I won't ask 2 of them. I won't ask 1 of them. For 2 questions, I want definite answers. If you are not able to give me the answers today, please let me know before the Finance Committee meeting. United Court, 1,800 units. For those who waited for more than 3 years and who are eligible, are there really just 700 households, or how many households are there? Second question, you say for the NT projects, there's an occupancy of over 80%, but how many have actually been on the waiting list for 3 years or more? That's the most important indication. Because for like public housing is also for households who've been on the waiting list for 3 years or more. Secretary, while many figures are involved here, perhaps we could provide the information after the meeting. Yes, please provide information after the meeting. Because it involves, details about occupancy rate, and the United Court is not covered here in this item. So you could respond after the meeting. Mr. Tan, you haven't used up your 2 minutes. I have no more questions. Thank you. Mr. Tang Fei, sorry. I've already drawn the line before you press the button, so I can't allow you to speak, but you could put forward your questions to the administration either orally or in writing after the meeting. Now, a member has asked to claim a division. Are you going to claim a division now, Dr. Tick? Yes, I claim a division. In that case, we'll put the item to a vote. That is whether we agree to refer the item to the Finance Committee. So since we're claiming a division, the division bell will be rung for 5 minutes.
得，我知道。而家我哋要表決嘅。
Now the item we're voting on is whether we agree that paper number PWSC 2022 to 2335 and the proposal therein. Do we support the proposal? So that's what we're voting on.
哦，係啊，呢度呢樣好齊全。呢個咧以前就識念嘅，因為次次都要記名，而家唔同啦。簡單提示大家。
If I may just remind members, the division bell will be rung for 5 minutes. After that, you could use the voting buttons in your seat for you to vote. I'm sure you're familiar with the voting system. First, you have to press the present button, and then you could then vote. Taking this opportunity, if I may thank members who attended meeting, both members of this subcommittee and a few members who are not members of this subcommittee. They've all put forward constructive views. Some of the views expressed were similar or identical, but then of course members also try to avoid questions already asked. So that's why it's a very good quality discussion that we had today. I'm grateful to members for that. Thank you.
好，而家可以進行。
Please proceed to vote. Before I declare the voting results, please check your votes, members. Yes, if you're voted, okay. Members present, 36. Those who voted, 35. And as the chairman, will not vote. So voting is closed. 36 present, 35 have voted. 34 have voted for. There's no objection, and there's 1 abstention. So the item is endorsed. Now, do we recommend that the FC to have further discussion of the paper number PWSC 2022 to 2335 in accordance with paragraph 3 of the procedures of the Public Works Subcommittee? We have to consider whether we should recommend to the Finance Committee to have further discussion on the proposal in this paper. So can we put it to a vote? So the question is, the Public Works Subcommittee recommends that the Finance Committee should further discuss the paper number PWSC 2022 to 2335. So those in favor, hands up, please. Clerk, please do a tally. How many? 24 for. Those against? That is, you're saying there's no need for the Finance Committee to further discuss the paper. Those against, hands up, please. 1, 2, 3. So the question is agreed. That is, the Public Works Subcommittee suggests that the Finance Committee further discuss this paper. For item 2 on the agenda, we have to leave it to the next meeting. The next meeting will be on the 22nd of February 2023 from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. Members, please attend the meeting punctually. Now, I would like to thank the government representatives for attending today's meeting. Thank you so much.